Hey everybody, it is late at night and I am Norman. I actually only own one dive watch. That is so crazy. But while I still have my brother's watches with me, I am drowning in dive watches. My Serica 5303 just came back from servicing, so I thought let's take my brother's 3 dive watches and my Serica 5303 and look at them all together. We'll do a comparison video, so let us begin. So tonight I want to try and look at these 4 dive watches as unbiasedly as possible. I'll just go over the potential pros and cons of them, but be sure to stick around until the end of this video where I'll do wrist shots of each of them and I'll reveal my personal preference from favorite to least favorite. The watches we'll be looking at tonight are the Serica 5303, the Tudor Black Bay 58, the Steinhardt Ocean One, and the Glycine Combat Sub. We'll begin with the Tudor Black Bay 58. So with this watch, the obvious, you are getting Rolex DNA in this. That is a big plus for this watch. If you prefer an uninterrupted dial, this has no date. However, if you do like date complications, that might be a negative for you. There are no crown guards. That may be a negative for some people. And the snowflake hands can be a little bit divisive. Some people like them, some don't care, and some can't stand them. With this watch you get a nice classy sub style there, but it's unique. It's obvious what brand this is. The water resistance is decent at 200 meters. It has a very solid bracelet. However, I imagine the rivets on the side might be divisive. The clasp is very solid. The fold over is good. It has 3 micro adjustments. If that is not enough for you, that would be a negative on this watch. Next up is the Glycine Combat Sub. This has an all black case. So if you are not into that aesthetic, or you're nervous about it scratching and the metal showing through, that might be a negative for you. However, if you do like all black watches, that would be a plus for you. This has a date window. If you don't appreciate those, that would be a negative for you. The indices on this are not loomed, but the batten markers are. So all the indices are loomed. It does have crown guards, which may be a plus for you. The dial is not very minimal, so if that's what you're after, this may not be the piece you're looking for. But if you like really combat looking dials, this one might be right up your alley. The Lollipop Hour Hand doesn't have the Mercedes divider in there, so if you are not a fan of those hands, this might be more tolerable for you. The bracelet on this is also solid. It has a fold over and 4 micro adjustments to it. And it has 200 meters of water resistance, just like the Tudor Black Bay. Next up is the Ocean One, and the patinaed loom is definitely divisive. In this piece, it's darker than usual. So if that bothers you, that would be a negative for this watch. However, that's just those who are bothered by patinaed loom. This is a no-date piece, so the dial is uninterrupted. However, if you appreciate having a date complication, this watch does not have one. There are crown guards, which may be a plus for you. The bezel has indices all the way around, however they aren't loomed. If you like a more minimal bezel, then this might be a negative for you, but if you don't mind it, it may be a bit easier to read with these indices here. The bracelet seems to be on par with the other watches that we've looked at. It has a fold-over clasp here, no micro adjustments. However, it does have a glide lock system to it. In my review video of this watch, I was actually incorrect. This bracelet is the Steinhart Bracelet. My brother just purchased the clasp itself and made it work with this bracelet. So I'm not sure what kind of micro adjustments or exactly what clasp you get with the Steinhardt. You'd have to look at their catalog. This watch has 300 meters of water resistance. Also with the Combat Sub, you get 60 clicks with the bezel. So in a way, it may be easier to get to exact minutes. However, if you prefer more of a standard bezel there, this one might bother you. And last, we have the Serica, and this watch has some elements that are kind of Omega in style, like those hands, and some might argue the bezel as well, but you do get kind of a unique look to that dial with those indices. This piece is also no date, so that may be a negative if you do prefer having those. A positive if you prefer an uninterrupted dial. There are no crown guards. All of these watches do have screw-down crowns though. The bezel serves two different purposes. You can use it as a GMT or a dive bezel. However, it is unidirectional, so that may be kind of a pain when using the GMT feature, but you do have two options there if that's what you're after. The dial's a little bit busier than some of the classic style dive watches, like the Black Bay or the Steinhardt, so that may be a negative for you, or maybe you don't mind that. This piece doesn't have a bracelet, but it does have a mesh band. It is a unique design if that's what you're after. And it may not be the easiest strap to use. That might be a negative for you. This enters through here and tucks in up underneath it, so there is no overhang on the outside of the strap, but it's kind of tricky to put it on until you have practice at it. This has 300 meters of water resistance. The indices on here are kind of small, so the lume will probably not last as long as the larger indices on, say, the Steinhardt, so that's something to consider also. So with two of these watches, we get sort of a classic dive watch aesthetic to them. However, these are completely different takes on that aesthetic. If you prefer sort of the Rolex Mill Sub style, the Steinhardt might be more appealing to you. However, if you like Tudor's aesthetic, then here's a Tudor for you. With the other two watches, you get sort of a really unique aesthetic to them. I personally haven't seen any watches that look quite like these two. There may be some watches out there I'm unaware of that kind of look like the Glycine. I certainly haven't seen anything that looks like the Serica. So uniqueness may be a bonus, depending on what you're looking for. All of these watches are amazingly tough. I'm not sure on the price point of the Glycine, but these two are kind of entry-level, mid-tier watches. The Tudor you'll be paying a bit more for, so that's something to consider depending on your price point. Alright, so let me take off my Anacar, and what I'm going to do is I'll do wrist shots of each of these watches in order of my personal preference, from least favorite all the way up to my favorite. So in order of preference, we'll begin with the Glycine. For me personally, as most of you already know, I am a no-date person. If I have a watch with a date on it because I think it's brilliant, I still end up just wearing watches that don't have a date. I really don't know what my deal is. But that would be the first ding against this piece. I do like all black watches like this. However, when it comes to dials, I generally like a little bit more minimalism. But this actually isn't that bad. I've owned a Marathon G-SAR, and I really like the dial on that. The big thing for me personally is just the date. Next up is the Steinhardt Ocean One. I have a soft spot for Mill Sub style watches. I don't know why, but I just absolutely love them. However, this lume is way too dark for me. I've owned the Baltic Aquascaf with kind of similar colored lume, and I ended up swapping that for white lume. I wouldn't mind this if it was a really, really light cream color, like really light, just sort of an off-white or egg white, but personally that's just a bit dark for me. That's the main thing. The bezel is a little bit busy for my tastes, but I don't think that would be a showstopper. But the darkness of the lume might be. Still a brilliant piece. Next up is the piece that I own, the Serica 5303. I bought this because I love how kind of, to me, Jetsons that dial looks, and the unique strap on this. I just really like the aesthetic of Serica watches. They do such a great job and kind of have their own identity already, even though they have just a few lines. And probably, hilariously, the biggest selling point, I was pretty stoked on the idea of it being both a dive bezel and a GMT bezel. And it actually wears kind of diminutive for a dive watch size watch. And for me personally, I like that. And perhaps unsurprisingly, my favorite of all of these is the Tudor Black Bay 58. I feel like the Black Bay is just kind of like the perfect dive watch. It's just absolutely brilliant. I personally would prefer this with the black colorway as opposed to the blue, but other than that, yeah. I remember when my brother first got this and I got to see it in person, I was absolutely blown away. I hadn't seen one before then. Just phenomenal looking. And it would kind of itch that vintagey mill sub style that I love so much. Even though the hands are a bit different, the overall look of it is kind of similar to that. So cool. So glad to have been able to spend some time with this and the other two dive watches and his brilliant Dan Henry. So there you have it, 4 brilliant dive watches, each with strengths and potential weaknesses. Ooh, it's a tough choice. But if you're on the hunt for a dive watch, hopefully this video kind of helps you make your mind up. Thanks for watching.